So again, welcome to this webinar for ACCES-VR, the Mental Health Webinar Series in Community of Practice. And this is session 4, Applying Communication Strategies to Effectively Manage Challenging Situations and Behaviors. Next slide, please. This webinar is sponsored by the Northeast and Caribbean Mental Health Technology Transfer Center, or MHTTC, and we're housed at Rutgers in the School of Health Professions in the Department of Psychiatric Rehabilitation and Counseling Professions. My name is Kathy Rivera, and I'm the project coordinator of the center, and I'm introducing our center and our webinar presenter for today. And if you're interested in staying up to date with the events and products that the Northeast and Caribbean MHTTC is providing, we ask that you please sign up to receive our email announcements for our future training events. You may do so by clicking the bit.ly link that I'll share in the chat box. And following this webinar, you'll be asked to complete a brief survey. We value your feedback and use this to inform our future activities. Also, the surveys are also important because our continued funding is linked to the completion of them. So again, we thank you in advance for your feedback. As mentioned before, this webinar will be recorded and posted on our website along with the presentation slides within a week of this presentation. Next slide, please. This presentation was prepared for the Northeast and Caribbean Mental Health Technology Transfer Center under a cooperative agreement from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, or SAMHSA. All material appearing in this presentation, except that taken directly from copyrighted sources, is in the public domain and may be reproduced or copied without permission from SAMHSA or the authors. Citation of the source is appreciated. We ask that you please not distribute or reproduce this presentation for free without specific written authorization from the Northeast and Caribbean Mental Health Technology Transfer Center. At the time of this presentation, Miriam Delphin Rittman served as Assistant Secretary for the Mental Health and Substance Use at SAMHSA. The opinions expressed herein are the views of the speakers and do not reflect the official position of the Department of Health and Human Services, or SAMHSA. No official support or endorsement of DHHS or SAMHSA for the opinions described in this presentation is intended or should be inferred. We ask that, we encourage you to interact with our presenter during the webinar. You may do so by using the chat feature. Also, during this presentation, you are able to unmute your mic. And if you're not using your mic, we ask that you please mute. And also, you have the full capacity to control your video. Next slide, please. The MHTTC network uses affirming, respectful, and recovery-oriented language in all activities. This includes language that is strength-based and hopeful, language that is inclusive, accepting of diverse cultures, genders, perspective, and experiences, and that is healing-centered and trauma-responsive, language that invites individuals to participate in their own recovery journey, language that is person-first and free of labels, and is non-judgmental and avoids assumptions, and language that is respectful, clear, and understandable, and consistent with our actions, policies, and practice. Now let's begin our webinar session for today. We have Joni Dolce with us. Joni is an assistant professor in the Department of Psychiatric Rehabilitation and Counseling Professions at Rutgers School of Health Professions. Joni has several years of experience working in behavioral healthcare settings, namely supported employment. Joni teaches courses in the department undergraduate program, as well as provides training and technical assistance to behavioral healthcare providers. Her research interests include staff training and employment services. She presents nationally on the topic of employment services and is listed as a Society of Human Resource Management recommended speaker on the topic of creating workplaces that support mental health. Again, welcome everyone, and I will turn it over to Joni.
Welcome back, everyone. So nice to see some familiar faces and others who are joining. As Kati mentioned, this is our 4th of the 4 training series. So this is the application part. So we're going to be doing a lot of work together in our breakout rooms and coming back to the main session, working on kind of applying the material that we talked about last session. We're also going to spend a little bit of time reviewing some of that material in the beginning. I did want to just a couple of housekeeping. We're going to take another break around 2:30-ish, kind of depending on where we are with the material. But of course, if you need to take a break at any time, but 2:30 seems to be a good number depending on where we are. And I also wanted to get an idea of how many people are interested in planning to attend the community of practice session. So we have one starting March 17th, and from March through August, we're going to be holding these sessions, 1-hour sessions, to again kind of troubleshoot and talk about some of the challenges you might be continuing to experience, implementing some of the material, using the community here and others who might not be on the call today, but who have been part of the training series over the last couple of months, having that peer feedback and an opportunity to describe issues or challenges that you're experiencing in that 1-hour session. Again, CRC credits are going to be issued by ACCES-VR for those sessions, and they're 1:30 to 2:30, and the dates are here. I think many of you already acknowledged what dates you're planning to attend, but if you are interested and are able to, please let Buki or others know at ACCES-VR. Anyone have questions about the community of practice and what those sessions will look like, and what our plan is for that 1 hour together? You can just raise your hand. We have a nice kind of intimate group. We have about 25 people today, so raise your hand or unmute your mic, pop it in the chat if you do have any questions about that community of practice and what our goal is. But we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months together to again continue to explore the topic of mental health conditions and challenges that may present themselves when you're working with someone with a mental health condition. Erin has her hand up. If you want to.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just put my hand up to say that I would join the next.
Oh, thank you. Very, very nice. So I'm glad people are enthusiastically letting us know. But yes, if you have time in your schedule, I think it'll be a wonderful opportunity to continue these discussions with people here on the call. So why don't we move into our objectives for today. So you had some prep work that we talked about in our February session to come back with some, and I have that listed here in the next slide, what the prep work was, come back with some information that we're going to use today to really talk about some scenarios that you're all experiencing in terms of common communication challenges or behaviors that you're encountering when you're working with someone with a mental health condition. We're going to talk about those core communication skills, including active listening and some de-escalation techniques that we talked about last time when we are talking about challenging situations or behaviors. And then finally, we'll explore some ways that you can implement some tools and resources into your own work and come out of this today with an actual kind of living document or some specific tools that you're going to be implementing into your own work, or having a discussion around some of those challenges to implementing some of this into your own work, but coming away from today with some kind of concrete ways to implement some of what we're talking about. And just kind of a plug, one of my colleagues, Kenneth Kinter, is going to be doing a suicide assessment and prevention workshop in March, this month, March 21st. I believe ACCES-VR has distributed, or they will be distributing, the flyer for that 1.5 hour workshop on assessing and developing skills and strategies to address suicidal situations. So we're not really talking about that in this cluster of trainings, although absolutely crisis situations revolve around that suicidal those suicidal issues and concerns, but there will be some additional work the end of this month on that. So if you're interested, you can certainly email Kati or me, and we can provide you with that information, or wait and see if you have that flyer from DVR. Has that flyer been distributed yet? Just curious if anyone has seen it. It's March 21st. So if you wanted to think about what you have on your schedule that day, I can't remember the actual time. Yes. Okay, good, Marissa. Thank you. So here we go. Any questions about the agenda or objectives before we get started? So just Nadia.
As for the flyer, yes, but I believe each office is allowed about 2 or 3 people.
Okay. Okay. So maybe not everyone would be available to go or able to go at this time, but certainly, hopefully, the expectation is that people will be bringing that information back to the teams. Okay, great. Thank you, Nadia, for clarifying. So a brief review over the last 3 sessions. We talked about initially our beliefs, values, and attitudes as rehabilitation counselors and how they impact our work with individuals, and kind of framing that work under working with individuals with mental health conditions. We also talked about, most recently in our communication strategies workshop a couple of weeks ago, we talked about some de-escalation techniques and the role of empathy in rehabilitation counseling. So maybe we can just have a quick discussion about what that role of empathy looks like, just a reminder or a review for people who have been at the previous trainings, or for people who are new today. You can pop in the chat or just raise your hand and we can have a discussion. But what is the role that empathy plays in rehabilitation, or what does that mean to you, having empathy in your role as a rehabilitation counselor? And considering, how does that, Keith writes, having an understanding. So yes, being able to understand the person's perspective, having that understanding. Empathy, Michelle's writing, empathy allows us to develop and sustain rapport with our participants. Absolutely. So having that rapport building, that opportunity to develop, and also, as Michelle writes, sustain rapport. So people are coming to you with goals of returning to work or goals of going back to school. Having that person, you, the counselor, be available, and having you have that trust, just like Arlene is writing, to talk about what their interests are, what are their values, what's really important to them in a career goal, and having that trust in you that you'll understand where they're coming from, and listen and develop that relationship so that they will continue to talk with you about what their interests are and their support needs and what they believe might be obstacles that come in the way. So yes, absolutely, building that trust. And when we think about our topic from last training and then our continuation today, why is having that trust or that rapport so important when you might be managing a situation that's difficult, or a challenge, or the person is in a state of a crisis situation? David writes, demonstrating to them that they have dignity and value. Absolutely. So even in a crisis situation, or if someone is coming in and very unhappy, or expressing behaviors and other things that you can just see that the person is not in a good state at that moment. Just like David said, drawing on our principles and our values of dignity and non-judgmental. Arlene writes, the person is likely to cooperate and follow your recommendations or suggestions if they trust you. Yes, and absolutely. And also, like David said, if they believe that you value them and we are treating them with respect and dignity. So if we can think about the values that we talked about and the principles from our previous trainings, the genuineness, the empathy, the acceptance, kind of guiding some of that work that we're going to be doing today when we're applying some of those communication techniques. So before we get into sort of looking at those de-escalation strategies or tools, I want to kind of bring back again a review of our listening skills and just making sure that that foundation of active listening and empathic listening. What are some of the listening skills that we talked about in previous sessions? Particularly the session before this, what were some of those listening skills that we talked about being beneficial and being helpful when we are working with someone? Wendy writes, not just listening, but hearing. Keith, nonverbal communication. So Wendy, when we are not just listening, but hearing, how do we show that? How do we show someone that we're actually hearing what they're saying? We're not just listening, but we're hearing, and we're building that empathy and trust. Michelle writes, showing compassion. Yes. Making eye contact. Tana is certainly a way that we can show summarizing. So if we think about ORs, right? If you're familiar with motivational interviewing, Arlene just wrote asking open-ended questions, getting them to talk more about the subject, reflecting back. Reflections can be simple reflections of just content. So you're paraphrasing what the person is providing to you, or they could be more advanced reflections where you're reflecting back meaning or feeling. So the person comes in and they may be talking about something really, really hurtful to them or really uneasy or uncomfortable. And if you're able to kind of dig a little bit deeper and show some more advanced empathy and reflect back a feeling of what that person you suspect might be feeling based on their body language, based on the words that they're saying. Lourdes showing appropriate body language, such as leaning in to indicate active listening. Yes, so leaning in, the person here is behind a desk, but you can see that she's leaning in, talking to the other person. So, you know, if you are kind of bound to that setup in your office where the desk is there, which, you know, ideally it would be nice to not have that desk in front, but if that's the situation, kind of leaning in and making sure that person sees that you're wanting to not just listen, but hear, like was mentioned earlier. And those reflections are sometimes difficult, right? Because people might be giving a lot of information to you, and to reflect back feeling and then to reflect back meaning. So identifying what the content is, what specifically is the person telling you, what's the feeling behind it, and then merging the two. And one of the formulas that are used in active listening and communication techniques classes are from Kharkov. Kind of, if you're familiar with or have studied that in your educational programs, but it's a formula. So you feel because, and then you attach what that content is. You feel angry because your parents won't drive you to work. You feel dismissed. You feel hopeless. You feel whatever that feeling is that you can assess from what the person is telling you and exhibiting through their behaviors, and then attaching that content to help the person really believe and understand that you're listening to them and hearing. I love that, not just listening, but hearing those messages beyond just the words. So this is just a reminder. We want to focus on the person's appearance and the behavior. Again, this is a review. What are their body movements showing us? Are they agitated in their body movements? Is their grooming off compared to what it typically is? Facial expressions, do they look angry or sad, or other types of facial expressions? The body build we talked about, what exactly does that mean? Has their build changed? Are they losing, gaining weight? Are they, sunken in? Whatever that body build might indicate to you that something is off. Their posture, so someone's, leaning over or hunched. We want to look for that incongruence, right? We want to make sure that the person's not saying, "Oh, I'm fine, everything's good," but all of these other observations that we're making suggest otherwise. What would be an example of incongruence when you're working with someone? Or what have you observed? And then the person, you can tell that what they're saying to you doesn't necessarily match what you're observing. What would be an example?
Would it be like when they say they want to work, but then they don't show up for their appointments with the job developer?
That might be some incongruence. That might also relate to the person's readiness, and not just readiness in the sense that we, in their ability, but the readiness in terms of their intent and their belief that work would be possible or positive. So there could be an incongruence. The person is saying, yes, 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 I want to work, but you're seeing that they're not showing up and or not going on interviews when they're scheduled. And that could suggest that the person may need some readiness development. Maybe they are concerned about benefits. Maybe they're concerned about losing friendships that they've maintained throughout the day, and going back to work would eliminate that. So yes, I think that's a good suggestion. I think I have a couple in here. I want to make sure I'm catching up. Showing appropriate body language, such as, Tana Marie say that they want to work, but do not accept anything, saying that they're interested in a certain goal, but they show no enthusiasm. So showing, yes, I want to do that job, but really you're not seeing any enthusiasm. And that could suggest, maybe others are making that suggestion, or maybe they feel that that's the only type of job that they possibly could get. So they are just not very enthusiastic. That's a great suggestion. Dave, frequent long sighing, but saying that they feel fine. Yes, so someone might be sighing, or you can just see in their posture, but they're saying they're okay. So just kind of looking beyond just the words that someone is saying. Marissa, appearance and affect doesn't match what they're saying. So yes, these are great examples just to be mindful of. And again, probably not new information for this group of counselors. I know many of you, thank you for completing those initial surveys, but this group is comprised of people with advanced degrees, probably have this information. This is a reminder. If you're anything like me, maybe that information we had quite some time ago, and it's always nice to be reminded of these more basic communication and active listening skills. So when we think about communicating in a crisis, I did want to go over again what we talked about in that last training very briefly, but we do want to make sure that we're following the suggestions in your agency, or whatever protocol in the agency you might have in terms of what to do in case there is a crisis, or if someone is actively stating that they're going to hurt themselves or hurt others. You would want to first and foremost make sure you and the person are safe and following those policies and practices that are set forth in your agency. But we also, as we saw with some of those scenarios from last week, there might be times when the person isn't in a crisis that needs to be addressed immediately. You might be in a situation where you're talking to someone and they are exhibiting some challenging behaviors or challenging other challenges that in this immediate situation you want to maintain or help that person maintain a sense of calm. So these are just some suggestions using those communication skills. People want to be heard, right? So people want to, you want to show, just like you all mentioned in the listening skills activity right there, or question, the person needs to feel that you're listening to them, that you're hearing what they're saying, you're using those reflections, and you're maintaining an even tone of voice. You're slowing down your speech so that the person can understand what you're saying. If you're talking very quickly and very fast, that could escalate the crisis, right? So the person might not be hearing you, or not able to understand what you're saying, or they might be seeing your sense of urgency and lack of calmness, and that could escalate whatever feelings they're currently experiencing. Maintaining a calm demeanor, using those short, simple questions, so or short, simple sentences. So making sure that you're, very, very, a very understandable way you're conveying information. When someone might be experiencing delusions or hallucinations, you want to help get a better understanding of what they're feeling in that situation. If someone is experiencing a hallucination, okay, so we have a question. How can you help someone who's hearing voices while in a session with you? You could ask the person if we have some time that we need to talk about your interest and what your job goal is. You can ask the person to try to pay attention to your voice and what you're saying for that time. If you're really unable to do that, yes, Michelle, you'd want to know the content of the auditory hallucination. Yep, you'd want to know what the content is, because that could inform the person's safety or your safety. So you want to, what are you experiencing? What are you feeling? What are you hearing? And if they're able to tell you what they're hearing, and then you might want to say something like, I understand that that's what you're hearing. If we're able to continue to meet, if you could focus on my voice and help them sort of, focus on what you're saying. You certainly don't want to dismiss what they're feeling, but you also don't want to pretend that you're also, experiencing something similar. So you do want to be careful to make sure that you're acknowledging that this is what the person is currently experiencing, although that's not what you're experiencing, and you can let the person know that you're not hearing that same voice, or you're not hearing that same or seeing that same image. Have people come across situations where that has happened? Where they needed to communicate with someone who may have been experiencing an auditory hallucination or a visual hallucination? Okay. Absolutely. Okay. And Carrie, how was that exchange? What were some of your thoughts around that? Michelle, yes.
I've had numerous situations with that before. The ones that stick out the most for me are the ones where the person is aware that the voices aren't real, but because the voices are so persistent, it's they constantly question the validity of it. They know that they have a mental health diagnosis, and they know that they don't want to say harm themselves, for example.
Yes.
But this is always tell them to, so they go back and forth. Where is this real? Is this not real? It doesn't feel real, but it does feel real. And it's, from my experience, it's always been best just to show the empathy that we were talking about earlier, and to show that, you know, your understanding of the confusion that they're going through, because it's not just telling them, no, it's not real, just ignore it.
Yes.
It's so real
Yeah.
for them.
Yes.
It's as if I'm not really there and I'm talking to them. You know, it's just a very real situation. So making them understand that you understand that it's real for them,
Yeah.
and it's okay that it's happening, and that you're not looking at them any differently for it. And you
Yes.
just listen to what's going on. Okay, so what are the voices telling you? How do you feel about what they're telling you? Do you want to listen to them? Do you not want to listen to them? You know, and giving them maybe some ideas of ways to distract themselves if they're able to or want to. But it's a very stressful situation for the person when
Absolutely.
it's happening. And I think just recognizing that and being really, really calm throughout it is just very important.
I love the idea of helping the person come up with, okay, what can I do to help you in this moment? What would be helpful? Would, you know, maybe a couple of choices. Would it be helpful for me to sit with you and write down some notes? Would that be something helpful, or whatever, get from the person what might be a more productive session?
Yeah.
Lourdes writes, yes, I asked what the voices were saying. They expressed that the voices were not active at the moment and that the voices were never angry or asking that he hurt others. So yes, you do want to, if the person is actively responding to auditory hallucinations, you do want to understand what the content of those are. Let's see if any other, and then Katya, I know in your work in the mental health field, you probably encountered this at times as well. So if, you know, anything that you would like to offer in your work in residential and working with people with mental health conditions throughout your time in the field.
Thank you, Joni. Yes, and especially during a de-escalation of a crisis, all of these factors that you have indicated on the screen is crucial, and it will definitely impact, especially the outcome. Sometimes when even just a simple even tone of voice during a crisis situation may also lessen the severity. And then if you also schedule a debriefing afterwards, it will allow the person or the participant to communicate how they felt in the moment, while they're still regaining a little bit more of their coping skills, while they're regaining their sense of safety, because at the same time, the staff member might also feel, you know, that their safety might be compromised, but the participant might also feel unsafe in that moment as well. So once they feel safe within their body, within their emotions, and within their person, they're better able to properly communicate what they need in the future, and it better informs, you know, the professional and, you know, how to handle the situation and plan if the situation arises again.
Thank you. That's great suggestions. You also want to make sure you're not smiling when, you know, if this is when you're trying to de-escalate, you want to be, you know, open but there are also things that if you know, smiling or laughing or whispering could accelerate the situation. You want to maintain a more neutral face when you are working with someone. You know, certainly you want to look approachable and kind, but you know, that could also come off uneasy to the person. If you're smiling, it could appear as though you're laughing, or so you just want to practice that and make sure. If someone's asking, why do the voices always say negative things to the individual? They don't always. I think that's why it's important to, when the person, like Kati said, is in out of that crisis and feeling safe, and you're working with them, maybe having a discussion about what the voices typically say, and how you can be helpful if in that situation, kind of in that immediate situation when it happens. I worked with a woman years and years ago, one of my first jobs, and she was one of the first people to go on some of the new antipsychotic medications. And one of her one of the issues, she actually mourned the loss of the voices. Her voices weren't necessarily negative and were almost calming, and she came to know them as kind of part of her. And that was something that she went through, almost like a grieving of losing those voices. I'm not saying that that happens with everyone, but the voices may not always be negative. Oftentimes they are negative or commanding, and that's why you want to find out what the content of those are. Let's see, we have some other chats. I've heard that the negative voices are evil spirits, and that may be something cultural, that if someone, if someone is being aware of what someone's culture is. I think there's enough scientific evidence to suggest that that isn't the case, that the voices are not evil spirits, but certainly you want to be mindful of what the person's beliefs are and what their cultural backgrounds are. And you don't want to be dismissive of what the person is telling you and what their beliefs around that might be. But you also want to provide accurate information. David's safety is a big factor, and hearing voices can cause much fear. Yes, so finding out what the content is, so you can know what type of next step you might need to take. So let's move on. The person might just need to vent, maybe letting them vent, maybe letting them kind of tell you how they're feeling and encouraging them to tell you what they're feeling. Try not to immediately, of course, this goes against our rehabilitation values, goals, and principles, but you don't want to argue with the person. You don't want to raise your voice. You want to hear what they're saying, summarizing what's going on to kind of help the person, again, understand and recognize that you're listening and you're hearing what they're saying, creating choices, but not too many choices. Maybe we can, if you would like, we can continue to meet today and finish our session, or if you'd like, we can meet at a later date, or maybe another choice could be we can together, if you want, if this is a really escalated crisis, we can try to get in touch with your psychiatrist or therapist, or we can maybe another intervention at that point. So creating choices, but not too many, but having that choice allows the person to be part and be focusing on that present situation. Some questions. I think with this again is a review from the way you're seated. You look depressed. Tell me what you're experiencing. So kind of calling people out on that incongruence. Marissa, letting them vent and get all their thoughts out helps de-escalate also. In your experience, you can't interject because it won't help the situation. Yes, so let the person ventilate their feelings and tell you what they're experiencing. And just kind of that venting could be helpful to de-escalate the situation. I know you're upset, tell me more. I know you're upset about losing the job, your mom's response to you getting fired, whatever that might be. Tell me more. Tell me what's making you upset. All of these open-ended questions. Describe to me what you're experiencing, seeing, or hearing, so you can get the content of what those delusions might be, or what the auditory or visual hallucinations might be. Any other questions that you can think that might be helpful when you're in this situation to de-escalate a crisis or manage a challenging situation or behavior? And it may all depend too in context, right? So depending on what you're talking about or where you're at and what the topic might look like. So we have our first breakout room coming up. So one of the kind of prep work before today was identifying a time when you needed to really manage a challenging situation or behavior. So really like a specific time, not just in theory what could happen or what what's a typical challenge, but something that you had to manage. What was the situation? Was it someone getting fired, someone coming in and upset about services that they were receiving, or someone upset about not getting a job, or whatever that situation might be? And what were those communication techniques that you used? What were some of those tools and techniques that you can kind of recall and remember using? And that could be anything from the questions that you remember asking, or roughly remember asking, or your kind of presence. How were you as a counselor present in terms of your body language and your solar? There was the solar that we talked about. Straight, open-ended questions, or open reflections, eye contact, leaning in, not reflections, leaning in, eye contact, and then reflecting back, or relaxed. So think about what were some of those techniques that you used. So we are going to go into our breakouts and have two kind of facilitators. One will lead the discussion, the second one will take notes. I have a template that Kati and I will put into each room. We're only going to have 4 rooms, so we'll have a nice group in each room. So we have 26 people. So we'll have 6-ish per room.
It'll be 6 to 7 people per room.
That's good. Some of the feedback from one of the earlier trainings was maybe having more people in a breakout room. So we're thinking that 6 or 7 could be a good number. So have each member, if time permits, or if it doesn't permit, think about at least having 2 or 3 members identify and kind of write on the template a time when they needed to manage a challenging situation or crisis, based on the prep work. So think about what prep work you did. And even if you don't get a chance, hopefully we'll have a chance for everyone to talk about it and list it on the form, or at least think about it, and think through some of the other activities if we don't get a chance to have everyone talk about it. But I think we should be able to do that. We have some time. It's 2:15. 15 minutes should be plenty of time. So that goes into 2:30. So we kind of talking about, I just put these here for you to have as resources, but kind of some of the initial strategies to engage individuals, and then what some of those goals, values, and principles are that guide our work. Much of this discussion today and last week, I can see so many of these principles and values kind of illustrated in what you're talking about, that strengths focus and partnering with the person and having that person-centered approach. Absolutely. And then, just if you could think about.
I'm sorry, can you put that screen back up?
Yes. Yep.
Thank
So
you.
Yes, no problem.
I'm just gonna
These
take
are
a
the
picture of it.
Yes, principles of psych rehab, but again, kind of transferable to all of, I think, the rehabilitation professions, focusing on many of these areas. So thinking about the training series as a whole, think about what were 3 key elements that you kind of took from the trainings. How will the training improve your work? What additional information or resources do you still need? If you can think about that, pop it in the chat. If there's anything that could help Kati and I craft or identify future training topics based on what additional information you need. Also, if you could think about those 3 questions in preparation for our learning community, thinking about what types of takeaways from this series do we want to continue to discuss when we have our 6 1-hour learning community of practice sessions. So you don't have to, if you want to write in the chat, please, that would be really helpful. You can also just be thinking about for your own, what are some of the things that you took away from this? What can we do to improve future trainings? And Kati, as always, will put the chat into our or put the survey information into the chat. So you can please give us some feedback on the survey regarding the training. It's brief, but it helps us a lot in terms of what we can do to improve future training. So thank you, everyone. Hopefully we'll see you on the 17th, which is our, I think it's the 17th. Yes, first learning community. Feel free, you can attend as many or as few as you'd like, but